Boom. So you just moved to a new apartment.
Yeah. Which is like for me, it's not that big a deal. Um, I could live out of a suitcase if I really wanted to. Um, just because I don't like having that much stuff, just like baggage.
Yeah.
I'm not really a materialistic person. I don't like having a lot of things. For me, having a bunch of stuff is just more stuff to worry about.
Oh, dude,
Um,
100%.
yeah, but my wife, on the other hand, um, like I think we probably took 12 big bags of stuff from the old apartment to here, and it was like 90% of her stuff. Like one or maybe two bags of my stuff, and then the rest just like her shoes and like makeup,
Yeah.
clothes. Oh my God, clothes. We were sitting in the old apartment, and she's just sort of looking at all the clothes she has. She's like, "Why did I buy so many clothes?" Or like, how did this fucking happen?" And
Yeah.
I'm sitting there like, "Yeah, I told you not to buy so many clothes." And she's like, just astounded by how much stuff she has. And then I'm like, "Yeah, well, maybe you should stop buying clothes." And she's like, "Yeah, I should." But we both know she's not going to stop buying clothes.
Yeah, dude.
So,
I forced my girlfriend to throw things out after a while. Like, I haven't seen you wear this in a year. You don't need it.
yeah,
I
yeah,
definitely get I definitely get that vibe from you being a minimalist. Like, even um I think I commented on one of your videos talking about like so many people stress themselves out by, you know, getting a bunch of things, maintaining a certain lifestyle to the point where they're just like stressed financially because they're just spending all their money maintaining a lifestyle. And for me, it's like for me, like I think it's healthy to be money focused to a certain extent. Like it shouldn't be like the main driver in your life, but being a minimalist, money just kind of serves as a buffer. It serves as like something you can use to buy your freedom rather than just being like shackled to material possessions. I rather drive a cheap car, live in a cheap, like just a nice home, but it's like a humble home rather than being like shackled to, golden, like having the golden handcuffs or whatever you want to call it.
yeah, 100%. I see people. I mean, that's America. People buying stuff they don't need and don't actually really want with money they don't have. That's how
Yeah.
things work.
To
Like what's
impress, to impress people they don't like.
yeah, no, exactly. And it's like this addiction, and money is only freedom and security if you're not a dumbass with how you spend it. And a
Yeah.
lot of people are just, I mean, they're not spending it well. Um, and when you're in debt, and I haven't been in debt, or at least not significantly, but I've definitely been broke. And like it's not that bad. Like it's not that bad not having stuff, right? Like you, you're fine. But a lot of people, they're not fine having nothing. They have to have like all this stuff that they have in their lives. I don't know, maybe they're just not happy with
Mhm.
themselves or something, and they use that to offset that. But yeah, it's a big issue, and I think a lot of people, they, how should I put this? They look down on people who are minimalistic. They talk down to them like, "Oh, you're a broke ass bitch," that kind of thing. And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Well, I'm not. I just don't need to buy the shit you need to buy to feel good." You know,
Well,
like it,
yeah, in reality, if you save your money, invest it, yeah, if you don't blow your money, you're going to be the one who comes out on top in the end. Even if you don't necessarily look like it. There's actually a book called the Millionaire Mindset or The Millionaire Next Door, and it's written by a PhD in economics, and they talk about in like the very affluent neighborhoods where people have all the things, the fancy brand new car, blah blah blah. They're actually the most they actually accumulate the least amount of wealth. Like most of the millionaires actually live in very humble neighborhoods. They drive a cheaper used car and they just save. And for me, it's like I'd way rather like make room for the things that I enjoy, like bodybuilding, you know, the things that you're passionate about. And even like, you know, when you got into doing YouTube as a career, it probably wasn't, you weren't focused on the money at that point, I'm guessing. You didn't start, oh, I'm going to make $1 million doing YouTube.
No, actually, I didn't even start on YouTube. I started on Quora
Yeah. Yeah.
writing, yeah, like writing for free. And, it was a tough time. And that's one thing where I think if you have a lot of money and you meet a woman, you don't know if she's into you or if she's into your money. And so I think if you, especially if you're like a billionaire or something, you would really have a tough time sorting that out. And I've heard so many stories of very, very wealthy men who got taken for a lot of money. It's known as starter husbands, where a woman who is attractive will go out and find herself a billionaire with the intention of divorcing him in a few years. Now she has a lot of money, millions of dollars, and now she can go find her real husband, someone she actually wants to be with. And so, yeah, if you're very, very wealthy, you have to be very, very careful because you have a lot more to lose. Whereas with me, I mean, I met my wife when I wasn't broke, but I had left my job. And for the next, like, couple of years, it was a struggle, big time. And, I was writing on this website, Quora, didn't pay anything, didn't really have any way to monetize it, couldn't even like get money here if I wanted to coach. So for like the first couple years in the fitness quote unquote industry, I mean, it wasn't a job. It was like I wrote 100 coaching plans for free just to get experience. And I'm sure my wife was like, what is this guy doing? Like, he's just spending all day writing answers for free on this website. Like, there's no way to monetize this. We're basically just getting by month to month. But I think if you build something and if you not necessarily have a plan, but if you, I guess, have faith and that things are going to turn out well, I knew things would be fine. I knew that it would be fine. It was just tougher to convince her at times that it was going to be fine, right?
Yeah.
But things are a lot better now, and it's nice seeing how things have turned out. But yeah, at the end of the day, I started just to help people, and I haven't really changed that either.
Mm-hmm. And I can't imagine moving to another country and trying to make a go of it. You know, that must have been absolutely crazy because you probably couldn't legally make money for the first little bit, eh?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely a period, like my wife jokes, oh, you married me to get the marriage visa so you can stay here, which is definitely not true. Um, but yeah,
It helps.
yeah, no, like it's nice having some stability there. Definitely for a while, I was doing the tourist visa thing, where you can get a tourist visa for 60 days. You can be here for 60 days. So people would go to Hong Kong, which counts as an exit, then come right back, stay here for 60 days, leave, come back. And then during COVID, you couldn't leave,
Mm.
right? Because you couldn't get back in. And so they were giving like extensions, but then they started kicking people out because, it's a tourist visa. You're not supposed to, live here on a tourist visa. So they started like not renewing those. And, so it was nice to finally get the marriage visa and have a little bit of life stability. But originally I was here on a work visa for like the first, I don't know, 7 or 8 years or so, just working as an English teacher.
Mm. So you've been there for a long time, 7 to 8 years, you said?
Well, by now it's been like 11 years. Yeah, about 11 years.
So was there something like when you moved there, did you plan on staying that long?
No, I just figured, a year would be fun. Um, and it was a little bit of a tricky situation because I liked the job and it was easy, but I didn't love it. And I think that's, if you hate your job, you'll just leave, right?
Mhm.
But if you like it and it's comfortable, but you don't love it, I
Mhm.
probably stuck around longer than I should have, 7 years or so. And by year 4 or year 5, oh man, I was just going through the motions, right?
Yeah.
Like just showing up, teaching the same lessons, still doing a good job, but my heart wasn't really in it. But man, it was working like 15 hours a week or something.
Mm.
And the money wasn't great. It was like roughly $2,000 a month, but you get free housing and like you get the free lunch. And, with those things considered, it's enough to basically live a decent life. But it was just too comfortable. And eventually I just realized I had to make a change. So I think in 2017, I switched.
And that's when you got into coaching? Is that when you started the YouTube channel?
So
Or
I
the
spent I spent like a year and a half. This is 2017, so like blockchain and crypto were first taking off. Um, so I spent like a year and a half or so there. Like tried to switch my work visa to that, and then that didn't quite work out. Just because when Bitcoin tanked in like early 2018, a lot of companies were struggling, and so eventually started coaching in like 2000, like early 2020. Then YouTube started in like March of 2020 or so, and then
Mhm.
just sort of gradually built that up.
Yeah, I totally know what you mean about, there's the certain jobs that absolutely suck and they're easy to quit, but then there's those other gigs that are just, they slowly suck your soul, but you don't even realize it happening.
Yeah.
I think a lot of men in particular are in that position. Uh, Even me, it's tough. It's tough, like finding the balance between, chasing security for like financial security versus, doing the passion project. Um, has there ever been a time while you're going down, you're really pursuing the YouTube thing, but you kind of having those second thoughts or doubts?
Not really. I think because initially I wasn't really doing it for the money, and I think that helped quite a bit. If you're doing YouTube for the money, it's going to be tough for a while, right? Especially if you're in an area that's harder to monetize. I guess I'm lucky in fitness where, people are willing to pay for information. And that's just what coaching is, right? It's just information from my brain to their brain, right?
Mhm.
Same thing with books. It's just information. Whereas, if someone's making cat videos or something, like at the end of the day, no one gives a shit about it, right? No one's
Yeah.
going to pay for your cat video ebook, right? Get so I think it depends on exactly what your niche is, and fitness is fairly easy to monetize, so it hasn't been that challenging. And I've heard some people say in the comments like, "Oh, this guy, oh, his shirt is ripped. We need to buy his ebook to support him," and stuff like that. Like, I do well. I just don't feel the need to show it. Some
Mhm.
YouTubers you see, oh man, they just really like shitting on their audience. That's what it feels like to me. Like when they show the Lambo and they show the car and they show the house and like, oh, the crib and here's my diamond, blah blah blah. To me that makes me respect someone less.
Yeah.
Whereas for other people, I guess they admire that person more. But man, like when I see someone with that kind of flashy stuff, to me it's not even a neutral. I'm like, oh wow, I didn't realize you were such a big piece of shit. They
Yeah.
just, but other people they think very highly of that. So I guess that's why they do it. But like, if I made $1 million next year, no one would be able to tell the difference.
Yeah. That's the
Like
way to
literally nothing would change.
That's the way to be, man. I appreciate that. As far as like getting an income off YouTube, you don't actually monetize your videos. It's just you sell your ebook and you sell your coaching. Like those are your main sources of income.
Yeah, yeah, those are the only two. Um, I might turn ads back on. A few fellow content creators have sort of urged me in that direction, and I might. I mean, I'm open to it, but it just doesn't seem as needed. And I mean, I've given up probably. I think I calculated it out, maybe $20,000 in ad revenue. So yeah, it's certainly something, but at the end of the day, I think there are other more palatable ways of monetizing,
Hmm.
and it just doesn't really seem worth it. And if anyone who's listening to this and has gotten my book, I really appreciate it. It allows me to do what I do. I don't particularly like sponsored videos as well. Just the thought of like having to send the sponsor the video for them to sign
Yeah.
off on it is kind of
Yeah.
like, I don't know about that. Like, oh, you swore a few too many times in this video. We're gonna need you to edit this out. Like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I didn't get in this to have someone be my boss, right? Like, I got
Yeah.
into this to be able to make my own decisions and say whatever the fuck I want. So I was
100%.
watching a video by the Pioneer, and he's like, "Yeah, sponsored videos are great. They're a
Mm.
consistent source of income, but man, I have to like send them this shit and get them
Was
to
that-
sign off on it and stuff." Like,
yeah, that was the video where he was talking about being burnt out.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I saw that video and was like, damn. Yeah, I think people don't actually realize how hard YouTube is. Like it's a grind. And like I
Yeah.
don't, I don't even I just do it a little bit, right? Like I'm not editing full videos or anything like that, but just man, like every part of it, like editing the videos, coming up with the thumbnail, just constantly coming out with new content. Like are you always do you have like a very like strict plan of what you're putting out? Or you're just like, oh, this happened. I see you put out a Liver King video, so I'm assuming that happened last minute just because of the video, and you probably just put that together in like a day or something like that.
It's a bit of both. It's more planned than it used to be. I used to just come up with an idea in the morning and then film it midday, go to the gym, edit it while walking around, just the first pass.
So weird. You edit on your
Put it
phone.
together.
You edit on
Yeah,
your phone. That must be such a pain in the ass.
it is sometimes, but I've sort of gotten used to it. And I might switch to like Adobe something, whatever, on my computer. I think there's more functionalities with that, but for now it seems to be working, so I'll probably just stick with that. And then I would edit more at night, upload it, thumbnail, title, timestamps, responding to comments. And yeah, like making a video is a full day thing, especially if it's like more than 10 minutes. It's a full day. You don't realize how much work goes into content until you create content. And so when I see like a Jeff Nippert video or a
Oh
Josh
man.
Brett video,
Yeah.
I know that takes the full fucking week. Like I can tell it's just it takes days and days and days. Um, and because you don't realize what goes into it when you're just watching it. You're just like, oh, and now even when I watch movies now, I'm like, oh well, this must, they probably did this and they must have created this and they have to script this out, and I'm sure this took 18 different takes. And so yeah, a lot goes into it. Um, but now it's a little bit more planned out. So I might have a few different projects that I'm working on over the course of several weeks just to get footage, and maybe I'm just trying something out, and then reporting back on the experiment.
Hmm.
And then there are other stuff that I'll just do the same day. Like if something big happens and I want to give my 2 cents, it'll be a little bit more sudden. And I do think having a mixture of both is useful because I don't want to be just a reaction channel where I'm just like taking other people's content and then just like watching it and
Yeah.
commenting. Like to me that's just like cheap throwaway content. Like I see the appeal of it.
I agree. It's very entertaining to watch, but after a while, you're just like, this is kind of toxic. It's like gossip YouTube.
Yeah, and plus it's almost like you're stealing someone else's content. And I know it's legal because you're changing it, because you're not just stealing it and putting it up there. your face is there in the corner and you're like, ooh, right? But to me, it seems if it's too much and it's like the only thing the channel does, then to me, like, what are you creating, right? You're not creating anything. You're just literally reacting to something.
Mhm.
So I haven't done that. But once you set it up, it's pretty easy to do, right? Like it's easy to create that style of content because you just hit play, you can do it all in real time. But
Mhm.
like creating the content, that's what takes a lot more effort and time.
100%, 100%. I actually saw you post a comment on, I think it was Revive Stronger podcast, where you were saying, people have kind of, or you've thought about going more down the production route, you know, fancier videos, maybe going down the route, but it might actually kind of like pigeonhole you a little bit. And I remember when I first stumbled on you on YouTube, I don't know, maybe like a couple years ago now, like quite a bit, maybe a year and a half ago. I can't quite remember. But I like that about your videos, how casual they were, just like kind of raw, just like phone quality videos, but like tons of editing, and like even the edits are hilarious. It's like charming. The videos are charming, and there's maybe a risk that if you go down the polished route, that it would kind of take that away. I'm not sure. I mean, maybe not. Maybe you could do it in a way that's just you slowly kind of just polish things up and make it more like uh,
Yeah.
production focused, but you probably have to hire an editor at that point.
The thing is, people like change, but they don't like too much change.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're always doing the exact same thing, people get bored of it. On the other hand, if you change everything all at once, it kind of freaks people out. I remember the YouTuber Tom Scott. He's a big channel. During the pandemic, he couldn't film in his usual location. And so to prevent having too big of a change, he put a green screen with his old place behind it. It's a
Holy
picture of the
shit.
old place because he didn't want too big of a change all at once, right? And so I think if you reinvent yourself, it has to be kind of slowly because yeah, if I just jump to like a cinematic, like if I hired a film crew out here.
Yeah, if you put out like a Jeff Nippard style video tomorrow, everybody would be like, "What the fuck?"
I think people would be open to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's the thing is you can't go back. Like if I go from that back to this,
Yeah.
people will be like, "Oh, well, this fucking sucks." So I think you have to be careful with how you scale things. And if you bite off more than you can chew, like if I could do that and then do it every single video, I mean, great, fantastic, right? Because you get new viewers in, because new mainstream viewers, that's what gets them to subscribe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like my channel is almost 100,000, but if I wanted to get to 1 million, that's what I would need to do,
Yeah.
right? Because to the average person, like some people might think it's charming, but to the average person, they're like, oh, well, this is shit,
To the
just because
average,
that's how they judge
yeah.
things. Right?
To the average person that doesn't really know how to judge the quality of fitness content by the actual information, they might look at it and go, "Oh, this guy doesn't know as much as Jeff Nippard because Jeff Nippard's videos look better." Or, it's like this appeal to authority or appeal to pretty video production. But we all know that some of the prettiest videos on YouTube are the most popular and most polished are actually sometimes the most full of shit.
Yeah. Well, to be clear, Jeff is sort of the best of both worlds because he does know what he's talking about for sure, but then he also has the high production quality.
Yeah.
I would
I
say,
wasn't Yeah, just to be clear, I wasn't saying
yeah,
Jeff is in that category. I was more thinking of like,
right.
like Athlean X and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like the sort of I call it like the Kino body look where it's like just cinematic everything, and then you have like the hot chicks, and I think some of his information is good, but he definitely has like that polished feel to it. Where like to
Yeah.
me, that's a little bit too much.
Yeah.
Because
Check out
Jeff is
this.
still like talking to the camera and like it's
Yeah.
still, I mean, it's high quality, but it's like it's not entirely Hollywooded, if that if that makes sense. Some of these channels, these new channels, feels like you're watching a movie. It's like I don't know, it doesn't feel like YouTube. It
Mhm.
feels like Hollywood, and as we all know, Hollywood is a lot of fake. So to me,
Yeah.
like, I actually don't like watching that kind of stuff,
Mhm.
but the average person does. So if you want to really blow your channel up, I think that's unfortunately kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah. But also you could think about it like, you know, maybe you don't want to appeal to a like a to the general population. Maybe it's better to appeal to a niche and have loyal fans that are actually engaged. Because I'm sure, like, a lot of like natural lifters, kind of part of this community, their engagement is way higher than a lot of the bigger channels. You know,
Oh yeah,
that's what
yeah,
I've seen. That's what
like
I've seen anyway. Comment section, likes. Once you have like a loyal niche fan base, like I guess maybe fan base is the wrong word to use, just followers, people that respect you and like your information, they're going to be much more loyal and more engaged.
yeah,
That
yeah,
that's
100%. If you look at, I guess Jeremy Etier, I mean, he is naturalist. I think he is. Um, but he might have a similar number of comments to someone like Basement Bodybuilding. And Basement Bodybuilding, I think he has 8K subs now. He's been
yeah.
growing really well. Um, but they get a similar number of comments per video sometimes, which is nuts because I think Etier is near 4 million subscribers. So, in terms of like reach, in terms of algorithm, I mean, Etier is crushing it. But in terms of like building a community,
Hmm.
yeah, I think overproducing the content definitely is not the best. And I really do think chasing views, it's not the best, right? Like I don't target people who aren't subscribed to my channel because that's how you grow a channel. You target people who aren't subscribed. I target people who are subscribed. The normies can
Yeah.
get out of here.
Yeah. Normie scum.
Yeah.
It was
So
interesting. Oh, sorry to
yeah,
cut you off there. It was interesting what you were saying earlier, not changing too quick. And like, to me, it's like thinking of yourself as a brand. When you started your channel, were you like Jeffrey Verity Schofield? Was that, did you ever think of actually having like a brand name or anything like that? Or, cause that's something
yeah,
I've even been debating. Cause like I came up with like a podcast name, but now I'm like, I might just like stop that. Cause I'm still a small channel. So I'm like, well, if I should probably set this in stone now before I actually like pursue like growing something. And I'm like, maybe it's just better just to have your own name and not try to. I feel like a brand, like even with Alpha Destiny, I think he's trying to step away from that and doing just, Alex Leonidas.
yeah. So part of it was just a lack of creativity on my part. You're just sitting there with like create channel, and you're like, fuck it, I'm just gonna type my name in.
Yeah.
um, and I do think there are advantages to having a brand, like just a name, Kino Body or something like that, because you can sort of step away from the brand if you need to, right? Like you can have it run on its own, someone else can sort of take over. But I also think that if you're a YouTuber, you can't really do that anyway because people are watching you for you,
Yeah.
right?
We
Like
just
when
just
someone watches a Kino Body video, I mean, imagine if Greg O'Gallagher was like, all right, I'm done with this shit. And
and some
some
yeah.
other shredded guy shows up one day. Like I don't think they could pull that off. And I mean that's because Greg is very, charismatic and people followed either for him or to make fun of him. And so, if someone else switches, I don't think that's really viable. So for me, it was partly lack of creativity and partly I saw some people switching from a brand name to their own name. And
Yeah.
so I was like, okay, this is a trend.
I
I'm
think
just
there's
gonna
a I think there's a reason for that. Cause then if you like come up with a name and you don't like it, like even Derek from More Plates, More Dates was talking about this with Joe on the Joe Rogan podcast, saying like, I don't know if I like my brand name anymore, if it's and stuff like that. It's a good name and it might not matter, but like at the end of the day, it's like, you know, I think about like the Bioneer, just as you were speaking, like some of these channels with like brand names. It's like the Bioneer. If I saw some random guy that wasn't him, doing the YouTube, I'd be like, oh, who the hell is this guy? Or like fitness FAQ. It's like I want to see the face of the brand, right? So that's something I've been thinking about. Maybe just doing my name just from now on. But
Yeah, I noticed you switched. Yeah, I think it's a good call. Like there's benefits and drawbacks, but probably mostly benefits, especially if you're on YouTube. Maybe if you're running a website, it's
yeah,
different just because it's not as I guess personal anyway. And so, having a more memorable name is maybe viable. But yeah, for YouTube or just for social media in general, I think
what
name
about
is
like for
probably the way
people?
to go.
What about for people who are maybe putting out like more long-term content or long-form content, and then they're like putting out on podcast platforms, but they don't want to necessarily come up with a podcast name? Like you literally just search like Damian Paul on Spotify, find the podcast. Like I don't even think that would really matter all that much. Like if I looked up, it's kind of weird, you know what I'm saying? Like if I just like went on Spotify, it's like Derek from More Plates, More Dates. He has all his YouTube audio on Spotify. Like if you did
Oh wow.
that too, like if I were just to listen, because half the time I do just listen to YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah, me
Which
too.
might be weird to some people, but there's tons of times where I'll watch your videos, but I'm not actually watching. I'm just listening. And then if I hear something that I look at my phone, I'm like, oh, that's what he means. And then I listen to the rest. And so like that could be maybe like you don't necessarily need like a podcast name or a brand name, but just have Jeffrey Verity Schofield on podcast platforms as well. I'm not really sure. I
I think
guess, yeah. What were you going to
if I
say?
did a podcast, it would be like the Verity Fit podcast. Because I think if yeah, because I don't know, would someone say like, oh yeah, I was on the Jeffrey Verity Schofield podcast? Like, I guess maybe that would work.
Mm.
Like it works for Joe Rogan, right? I was on Rogan, like it's just his name and it works. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I haven't really thought about that too much.
Yeah. I'm not even saying like who knows, podcast might not be your thing anyway, but
We'll see.
something to think about. Yeah, man. That's cool. That's cool. I guess my little brother actually asked a question that I wanted to throw your way. He's a pretty big fan, and he wanted to figure out like what you do as far as like training to failure, how you like what lifts in particular you go to failure on, whether that be like maybe you're leaving a few reps in the tank for compounds versus you're always going to failure on isolations. What does that look like? Because you train fucking hard.
Yeah, yeah. Good question. And I think it's an important question as well, because if you treat everything like a deadlift, you're going to be under training on a whole bunch of stuff, right? Because that's a big lift. It's axially loaded. The risk of injury is slightly higher. You don't need to go to failure as much, and you probably shouldn't go to failure as much. If you see a plan, it's like 3 sets of 8 to 10 on deadlifts to failure. First of all, most people are not going to be able to go to failure on deadlifts. Plus, you probably shouldn't. I mean, not even probably. You definitely shouldn't be failing a deadlift where it's like you're at your knees and you're just like spasming out.
Back's just fully rounded.
Yeah, it's just not a good idea. Same thing for squats. Most people will break down technically first.
Mm-hmm.
And usually that technical breakdown will be the spine rounding, especially for beginners. And so, I would much rather have a beginner keep 5 reps in reserve than, go to failure. I mean, you could even keep 10 reps in reserve as a beginner on deadlifts and be totally fine and get a lot out of the movement. It's still stressing the areas that you need to stress. Same thing for a squat. And so for those two particularly, so anything that's axially loaded, anything that is a big bilateral compound movement for the lower body especially, those are prime candidates for keeping a lot of reps in reserve.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where RPE came from. It came from powerlifting because they need to manage fatigue because those lifts are very, very taxing, particularly for the lower back. And this is where you see more and more powerlifters adding in a lot of accessories to get around the lower back. So when we talk about good stimulus to fatigue ratio for the lower body, usually it's what is not pissing the lower back off. because that area just can't take as much of a beating as the quads, as the hamstrings directly can, as the glutes directly can, right? So if you're trying to do all your lower body work with only low bar squats and only conventional deadlifts, the lower back is just going to be the limiting factor, right? And this is where you can keep reps in reserve for those to limit the fatigue, and then go closer to failure on something like a leg press, on something like a back extension, on something like a hamstring curl, on something maybe like a front squat, those kind of stuff, where it's a little bit more forgiving and you can train closer to failure more consistently, more safely, and still progress pretty well. It also has something to do with the strength curve. Typically, if something is more difficult in the contracted position, you can go closer to failure or even beyond failure. So if you're doing something like a sumo deadlift that is typically most difficult off of the floor, I mean, you might get a rep and it might look pretty easy. And then the next rep, it's just glued to the floor. The set is just done.
Yeah.
Like for some people, failure just comes out of nowhere. And you can learn how to feel this. You know, if it's a little bit tough off the floor, the next one might just be glued to the floor due to the fatigue and just the leverages. So for that, I mean, it's impossible to train a sumo deadlift beyond failure, because, you know, if you fail off the floor, like the lift is just done, right?
You're just sitting there like jerking the bar.
Well, I guess that's the end of the set. Whereas something like a row, you know, let's say it's a chest supported row, you're going to fail at the top. Everyone is going to fail at the top. You're going to fail this last little chunk of the range of motion, that last little centimeter, that last little half of an inch. And you can go beyond failure.
That's actually
pulling.
That's actually why I don't like training rows. That's why they're kind of a pain in the ass, because you get to that point where you're just like doing this, like at the very end, where you just can't get any range of motion.
But I think that's still useful. You know, I would post these videos.
Yeah, it's just interesting because it's like, you know, with a chest press, you know, it's very like you lock out, that's a rep. And then once you get to here, it's like, yeah, sure, you can do that a little bit, but you're pretty much done. That's why, like I've seen you pretty much, you take all of your pulls to failure, it seems. Like all of your like chest supported. What about like something like a barbell row though, that has a little bit more of like lower back fatigue? Are you doing that? Are you doing that at the end, or?
I don't even do them anymore, honestly. Just because, again, you have a certain amount of training money, and I talk about this in my book. You have a certain amount of training money to spend in various areas, and you don't have unlimited money. It would be nice to be able to train infinitely and just benefit from it all the way. It would be nice in some ways. You would have to train a lot, but I like training, so it would be fine. But you have a certain amount of money that you can spend, and various areas are going to be limiting you. So lower back is a big one. I tend to keep my lower back training money for lower body. So for squats, for deadlifts, RDLs, back extensions, I would rather use my lower back training money, which is very limited, for that compared to a barbell row. And there's nothing wrong with a barbell row, but you are taxing the lower back, and it is being used, when I would rather at this point just do a cable row, a chest supported row, that kind of thing. Because you're targeting, you know, the lats, the traps, the rear delts, the biceps just as well, if not better, because it takes the lower back pretty much out of it. And plus, it's easier to go beyond failure, because with a barbell row, you can do partials, but there's more of an ability to cheat, which is good potentially, but cheating can go both ways. Cheating can allow you to go beyond failure by getting a little bit of oomph, or cheating can allow you to avoid failure. So when it gets difficult, you just start cheating, and it actually puts less stress on the lats, on the traps, on the rhomboids, etc.
Yeah, like you're using
most
more
people
hip.
I see cheating do that.
Well,
Yeah.
what would you say to someone who maybe has a weaker low back though? You know, like someone who needs to um actually, be, axial loading is the scary word, but at the end of the day, like we need to do that in order to get a strong low back. So say some of these bodybuilders that are very, they're almost like too focused on the stimulus to fatigue ratio to the point where they're
Yeah.
like, don't do anything that loads the lower back. Um, Maybe for people that are more beginners, that's when something like a barbell row is a better option. Or, I don't know. How do you feel about that? Like for me, like I feel like my low back it's pretty strong, but I feel like even when I'm doing something like, because I did spend a significant amount of time just focusing on like getting strong on leg press and hack squats. And then I got to the point where like I'm doing like 2 plates on squat, and my legs are totally fine, but it's almost like my core and back get tired first. Like it's like I'm not used to that bracing. So maybe now is the time that I just focus on doing squats in order to get that. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, the squat is a core exercise disguised as a leg exercise for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Like if you're almost everyone can leg press far, far more than they can squat. And part of that is because of the angle of the sled, etc. But even if you take that out and you equate the forces, I mean, leg press forces are going to be much higher for the legs. So
Yeah.
I think for most people, the limiting factor of the barbell back squat is going to be your ability to brace, your core strength, lower back, etc. Now, one of the downsides of so-called optimal training is that it can lead to a reduction in volume of some areas. So yeah, if you're doing everything chest supported, if you're, all of your things are on a machine, you're just sitting there and you're doing all
Yeah.
your volume without any kind of core involvement,
Mm-hmm.
you might have to add core work back in, ironically. So it's like, oh, I'm doing these exercises to take the core out of it, but now my core has weakened. And it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like, oh, my core was weak on squats, therefore I stopped squatting and I went and I did leg press. I went and I did single leg work, which means my core got even weaker, which
Yeah.
means, back squats are even less viable. And so I do see some people go down that road.
Mm-hmm.
And often that's where you get injured because you go back to the back squat that you haven't done in a while and your legs are super strong because you've been doing
Yeah.
this other shit that's been actually working them a lot, but your core is now
Your back.
marshmallow status.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your
And then,
back doesn't know what the fuck it's doing.
yeah, exactly. So basically what happens is you become strong enough to injure yourself
Mm.
because beginners usually are not strong enough to really have like a serious injury. You might get a small little ache or niggle or something if you're just completely deconditioned, but you usually don't see a beginner tear their hamstring or something or tear a pec. Like,
Yeah.
how does someone tear a pec benching 1 plate? Like, it just doesn't happen very much, right? And this is part
Mhm.
of the reason why women get injured far less than men. The other reason is that they're smarter than us when it comes to making training decisions. But a lot of it is just they're using lighter loads as well as being more reasonable with things.
Mhm. How do you warm up for sets? Do you just do like the start with lightweight? Like do you do any kind of like priming ahead of time? I know it's kind of a priming. I don't
Yeah.
It's kind of maybe a stupid word to use, but just like any kind of like cardio to warm yourself up slash do some like banded work or anything like that, or you just jump right in?
Not much. I used to do more than I do now, and I haven't seen really any negative sides to not including it.
Mhm.
Maybe some face pulls before benching,
Yeah.
just to get blood in the shoulders, warm up, the rotator cuff, etc. But I don't even do that half the time anymore. Actually, not even half the time. I'll
Mhm.
do it if I feel like I need it, and I think that's the key. Where people are often now, they have like this blind routine that they're following, and
Yeah.
oh, I have to do this movement or this is going to happen. Oh, I have to do this prehab. You probably shouldn't do prehab unless you've experienced that issue before. And I
Mhm.
know the argument is like, oh, well, it's prehab. You're supposed to do this so that you don't get this. But the thing is, if you've never had that, it's probably not worth the time investment. If someone is like, I'm doing face pulls to prevent rotator cuff tears. Oh, so you've had a rotator cuff tear? No, no, I'm just worried about it because I watched a video by some influencer who fear mongered me into doing this. And I've seen people legitimately be doing prehab for like 30 or 40
Yeah.
minutes.
I back in the day, I used to do that bullshit. Now I have had like some low back issues in the past. So what I do is I'll quickly like warm up with maybe just like a salt bike or a row machine for like 2 minutes, 30 seconds, just real quick. And then I might just, if I'm doing lower body, I might just pump some blood into my low back, do some like flexion rows or like back extension where I round all the way, come up. And I'll just do like, 20, 30 reps just to get some blood in the area. Maybe I'll do some like sissy squats to get some blood in the knees. It's almost just more of like a psychological thing, but I just try to get it done real quick. I think that could be a benefit, but that's also, if you're doing squats, you start with the bar, you're doing the exact same thing, just working up to your working weight.
Yeah, that's generally my warm up. It's just do the exercise with lighter weight. I think what you're doing is smart, and that's a good idea. Just because some areas they do require a little bit more warming up, and the lower back is one of those areas. And so, yeah, back extensions are fantastic. If someone has had shoulder issues or maybe they have an imbalance or something and they want to work on that, yeah, I think face pulls. I think face pulls are great. I think they're a good movement in and of themselves. Just you can do them for hypertrophy, and so I think they're a good option. It's just that I see people doing them for the wrong reasons in a lot of cases. Like, oh, I need to do this so that this doesn't happen, and there's just really no evidence for that. And I've even seen not just prehab but rehab protocols where one group does a whole bunch of fancy stuff and then the other group does nothing, and the results are the same. So I think in a lot of cases, what people are doing is working, but not for the reasons they think.
And you could argue that, just all the basic movements if you do them well with good form and execution are going to be rehab movements, right? You're strengthening everything when you do that. So
yeah, exactly. Like, or same thing with mobility work. People ask me, oh, what do you do for mobility? Oh, I do loaded stretching. Oh, loaded stretching. Oh, yeah, it's called lifting.
Yeah.
Literally what? Yeah, I do. I put the bar on the ground, and then I bend over, and I brace, and then I pick it up a few times with heavy weight. Yeah, like there we go. Loaded stretching. Boom, there we go. Like that's. And so I think if you're lifting with a full range of motion, there's not much in terms of mobility work that you might need. Maybe for like hip flexors and adductors, maybe for pecs if someone is getting tight across the shoulders. But yeah, I don't think a huge amount of stretching is particularly needed or even beneficial. And then you get into stuff like foam rolling and active release and whatever. And yeah, people are just spending. I mean, people are surprised at how short my workouts are. So I might do like 25 or 30 sets on like a chest and back day, and people are like, "Well, man, you must have been in the gym 2.5 hours." Like, no, 90 minutes or so, right? Just alternating back and chest, not wasting a whole bunch of time. Training hard, going to failure or beyond failure or near failure, depending on the movement. Training hard but not wasting a lot of time and not spending an unnecessary amount of time on stuff that doesn't really do anything.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, I used to foam roll back in the day, and I haven't touched one of those things in forever. Sometimes I have one at my house, and sometimes I'll just use it to like stretch like over it like this, and just be like, I don't know if this is doing anything. It feels good, but it's kind of like even with stretching, like sometimes I'll just like stretch between sets or whatever, but I don't do it for any particular reason. I just kind of, just
I think if something feels good, that's enough reason to do it. It's the trouble is when someone is like, oh, I foam roll because of this, and this benefit, because I
Right.
saw this channel and they said this happens. And then, you look at the actual evidence and it's just not there. And I think that's one big benefit of science. When someone claims something does a whole bunch of
Mhm.
stuff, you see this in supplements a lot.
Yeah.
And then you look at the actual research and it
Yeah.
doesn't. Oh, this supplement does all this. And then like it just doesn't.
Hmm. A lot of the pain science is like that. It kind of just like everything we've done to treat pain is mostly bullshit. It's like just lift weights and eat well. Um,
Yeah.
to get into like something specific, you had that QL injury. How did you manage that? Like when that happened, must have been so frustrating. Was it like what kind of injury was it? Was it a noticeable right away? Was it like an acute injury or was it more of
Yeah.
just like yeah, you felt it tear kind of thing or strain?
Yeah, I felt it right away. And it was mostly like, what is that? Like, that hurts, and it's definitely not good. And
Was
it
it
was kind of like frustration as well.
it was your QLA? Like was it like right beside your spine or kind of like further to the like to the side?
Um,
Like, are you sure it was your QL?
yeah, I'm sure, based on the symptoms and what I researched.
Hmm.
Because it was unilateral and it was like right in the spot where
Yeah.
it was. So, um, I'm 95% sure that's what it was.
Mm.
Um, and a lot of it was frustration because I was doing a new movement while fatigued at the end of the workout. I've been doing full body workouts, and again, I hadn't been respecting my lower back training money. Going back to that, like I've been doing like squats one day and then deadlifts the day after, and then like there was something stressing that area every single day to a significant degree, which you can get away with on some areas, but apparently that was not one of those areas. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, I was doing strict deficit bent over rows, and yeah, one rep just, maybe I got a little bit out of position. I was just too fatigued or something. I do have some significant and visible imbalances in the hips. In I have a family history of scoliosis that's pretty significant, and you could see, like, I could see in some cases my spine is not 100% straight. Um, Although it's hard to say if that, like, how much that has contributed. And then my
Yeah.
shoulders also have some pretty significant imbalances. Like if I do a Bulgarian split squat, my left leg and my right leg feel totally different. And I've seen, like, I have some hip shift when I'm squatting sometimes, which is part of the reason I don't squat that heavy anymore. Um, because it's almost like I'm doing a one-legged squat with the other leg kind of helping out. Like
Oh
I've seen
shit.
some screenshots of me when I'm, standing up out of a squat, and it's like, here are my legs, here is my torso. It's just pointing, in a slightly different direction
Hmm.
than what my legs are.
You're still doing
So
squats though. You're just doing more like front squats and stuff like that.
yeah, so right now it's manageable, and I still think it's worth squatting. So basically, I'll do higher reps typically, or maybe just moderate reps. Like I won't go below 5 reps at the moment, usually. Front squats are good just because it keeps you under the bar. It keeps it more knee dominant. And
Yeah.
part of the hip shift is like the hips shifting back and then trying to find the right line of pull for the adductors. Whereas with a front squat, it's more quad focused. So if you focus on just keeping the knees forward, sitting down, and then as you stand back up, driving the knees forward as well,
Mm.
it makes it quad dominant enough that the hips don't even need to shift. It's more just
Yeah.
keeping everything in the quads and keeping very, very upright. And you
Hmm.
can't move a lot of weight in that style, especially if you're keeping the knees way forward because it's making those a limiting factor,
Yeah.
which is the whole point. And then I'll also do high bar paused squats. And again, this is very knee dominant, keeping the knees forward, staying strict. squatting down, around parallel. If I squat super deep with that style, what happens is that the hips shift back as I stand up. Then I get the hip shift. Then it switches, to more of a hinge style because I have fairly long femurs. So there's almost always a way to modify a movement. And by the way, it actually took several years to end up squatting that way. Because typically if you have long femurs, the instinct is for the hips to shift back. It's to put everything in the posterior chain so that you can move the most weight. So it took a while for me to learn how to squat in a way that was more challenging for the quads. So I could squat more weight, that style. It's just less sustainable and I get less hypertrophy from it. And so I've had to almost force myself to squat in a way that is more challenging for the areas that I want to develop.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense. And how long did that injury, is that injury still kind of pissing you off today? Is it on and off?
I've retweaked it like 7 or 8 times.
Oh, fuck.
On 7 or 8 different movements. So let me count the ways. Unilateral leg press, bilateral leg press, sumo deadlift, deficit deadlift, Romanian deadlift, back squat. I think that's all. Maybe 1 or 2 others. So I re-injured it. Oh, snatch grip deadlift. I've re-injured it a bunch of times. The last time I felt it was maybe a month and a half ago at the top of a sumo deadlift. Like you can just feel like this little.
Yeah.
You finish a rep and you're like, no. So every time I tweak it, it's not as bad as the time before. But when I first injured it, I couldn't really walk properly. Yeah. Like I could walk, but I had to stay very, very careful about how I moved.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't tell my wife, or at least I didn't tell her how bad it was, just because I didn't want her to worry. But the day after, I was trying to put on my shoes, and I couldn't bend down that far, so I'm trying to loop my sock, trying to throw my sock over my foot to get it over my toes, and I couldn't get it over my last fucking toe. So it took maybe 20 tries to get it over. And she's like, "What is taking so long?" I'm like, "Nothing you need to worry about." So finally got my shoes on, and then walking around, and it's one of those things where you don't appreciate the ability to walk until it's a challenge. Mm-hmm. And is it worth lifting heavy if there's that risk of not being able to do basic stuff? For some people it is. If someone is a professional power lifter or they're just really into it, yeah, maybe it's worth lifting heavy because that's your passion. For me, lifting heavy was never, first of all, I was never that good at it. So it's not, if you're not as good at something, giving something up is not that big a deal. So when I hear people say something like, we need to see what you can do in a barbell 1 rep max bench press. You have to do this peaking. I've had people send me plans that they want me to do. You got to do this plan. We need to see what you can do on a max bench press. If you can do the 100-pound dumbbells on incline, you should be able to do this in a few months. I'm like, I just don't care that much. And at the beginning of this year, I had, I set my goals, and this was before the QL injury, and it sort of changed a lot of things where before I was probably 70% hypertrophy, 30% strength. Now I'm 100% hypertrophy. The strength is just, it's a nice goal, I guess.
Maybe let's dive into that a little bit, because that's the area that seems to be a little complicated and nuanced. It's I'm the same as you. My main focus is hypertrophy. But in order to maximize my hypertrophy, I need to get stronger, but not in the context of a 1 rep max. It's more of if I'm dumbbell bench pressing 90-pound dumbbells for 10 reps, that's a lot better than I'm going to obviously have a bigger chest than someone who's doing that for Or if I was doing that for like 70 pounds for 10 reps, it's like I'm getting stronger. And like even today, I was kind of thinking about that. Maybe it's like as a bodybuilder, you're more chasing like strength endurance rather than like max strength. Like maybe that's the kind of the more nuanced argument, because people are always just talking about that, like, oh, you're chasing strength. It's like, no, I'm chasing hypertrophy, but what other measurement do I have? Like right now, I'm actually working with Faz as a coach, and he's got me doing I'm doing 2 working sets, and I'm doing like one all out, like heavy, like 5 to 10 reps. And then that's like kind of like my strength set, more like the lower rep range, moderate reps, I guess 5 to 10. And then I jump it up, or I bring the weight down, but then I try to do like between 10 and 20 on the second set. And, I'm more focused on poundages than volume right now. And I think that can be very useful, especially for someone like me who doesn't have I wouldn't say any of my lifts are impressive. I'm not necessarily, there's a few lifts where I'm like, okay, I'm pretty strong on that. But I don't know. It's a weird thing. Like, what does it look like to be pursuing hypertrophy, but using strength as a measurement versus just pursuing strength? It's like the argument this conversation just keeps going on and on, it seems.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you said, because you almost said something like, oh, if I am doing this much weight for this many reps and someone else is doing this much weight for this many reps, oh, of course, someone is going to have a bigger chest. Like whoever is stronger is going to have a bigger chest. And then you correct it to comparing yourself to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's an important distinction, because you can only compare yourself to yourself, because everyone is going to have slightly different leverages, but your leverages are more or less going to stay the same.
Yeah.
On the other hand, they can change. So if you get, very husky and your barbell bench press goes up 20 pounds, well, that's partly because you have more padding around your joints. You have more fat on the upper back, which, increases your stability. There's more fat on the chest, around the armpits, around the elbows. It's essentially like giving yourself elbow wraps and shoulder wraps, if that's a thing, and reducing the range of motion. You're doing like a board press based on, the man boobs that a bulking gives you. And so, if you put on 20 pounds of body weight and 20 pounds on your bench press, I mean, it's possible to maybe do that without gaining a single molecule of muscle, right? You just got better leverages for it. So I think when you are bulking, you have to chase performance, but you also can't chase it at the expense of other parameters. So if you are increasing your bench press, but you're doing it because you got better technique and you're arching more, and maybe you're dive bombing the eccentric, or your hips are coming off of the bench, that kind of stuff, and your bench press goes up a certain amount, well, you didn't standardize the technique. And so you don't actually know if that's going to correlate with hypertrophy. And so it's important to really try to keep the technique as consistent as possible. Lift in a very controlled way. If you're shortening the range of motion, if you're dive bombing things, if you're bouncing the bar, if you're slamming out of the bottom position of a squat, I mean, those might be good for strength, for lifting more weight, but they might not necessarily be great for hypertrophy. Volume is also going to skew things towards muscle growth. So you can get a lot of strength without a lot of volume. And the more volume you do, the more hypertrophy you're going to get for how much strength that you build. Training for hypertrophy, generally you're going to want to train closer to failure. So a lot of powerlifters, they never go to failure. They never even go close to failure, but they do get very, very strong, because it's more about the progression and the loading and the intensity compared to the volume and compared to the proximity to failure. So generally bodybuilders will have more volume and then a closer proximity to failure, as well as more exercise selection, just because you're not really concerned about specificity in terms of what carries over to, squat, bench, deadlift. You are essentially training everything. Everything is in your program for a specific area, rather than just getting a bigger lift with those 3 lifts.
No, that makes sense. Like even the way I approach squats, which is a powerlifting movement, but I approach them in a very like hypertrophy focused manner where I'm like going very slow on the way down,
Yeah.
going as low as possible. No, that all makes sense. It's just it's weird that that conversation just keeps on going on and on. It's like the strength versus hypertrophy thing. It is
Yeah.
nuanced. It's nuanced,
Yeah.
but it's simple at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, you have to realize that strength isn't the goal, it's just a metric. And so when something becomes the target, you start to optimize for that, and then it's no longer useful as a metric,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, if you are using your bench press as a metric for your chest hypertrophy, that's fine until you start to really focus on that too much. So you have to have it in line with all the other variables and not emphasize it too much. On the other hand, you can't emphasize it not at all, right? Like if you're just, oh, weight on the bar, it doesn't matter. Like, mind muscle connection, just get a good squeeze, work hard, your progression doesn't matter. You don't need to keep a training log, that kind of stuff. Well, then it's too far in the other direction. So you should be tracking your progress, but if you try to force it too much, then it suddenly becomes counterproductive. So somewhere in that range is going to be best.
Mm-hmm. What would you say a balance is? Let's say on the compound lifts, you're tracking religiously, you got your log book, but let's say stuff like you always recommend on isolation movements just to go to failure every time. So I'm thinking like for what I'm doing right now is I'm tracking all my main compounds, then stuff like cable bicep curls and tricep machine, whatever. I'm just kind of going all out to like just go like partials at the end, just burning, then I'm done. And like I'll track like the weight I'm using just so I know like a rough, but I'm not tracking reps. Because also like I don't know, like should you be religious about logging your initially I was religious about logging my isolations like curls and tricep extensions, but I almost felt like it stopped me from working hard because I'd be like, oh, I did my 11th rep. I did my 12th rep. I don't need to get, but now I'm just like, fuck it. I'm just going to the point where I'm doing like this shit at the end.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I think that compounds, you want to be a lot stricter with tracking. And I used to track everything like very, very strictly. And yeah, I've experienced the same thing. Something like a lateral raise, something like a curl, something like an extension. I think it's less necessary to track. And if it gets in the way of working hard, tracking might actually be counterproductive in some ways. But you still want to know at least what weight you used, I think. But in terms of like the exact number of reps, I think as long as you're in a range, it's probably okay.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense, man. Yeah, well, we covered a lot of really good topics. Yeah, I'm trying to think what else we need to cover today. I feel pretty good about that. What's kind of like what are you up to over the next little while? Like you still putting out videos like every week, every 2 weeks?
I try for 2 a week, and the past month has been a little bit hectic with the move. I was also in lockdown for like 3 or 4 days, but things seem to be opening up here. Yeah, it was frustrating.
Forced deloads.
Yeah, no, I go outside.
That makes me physically angry. Every time I see that, I'm like, fuck me, dude.
Yeah, no, I had to delete some stuff that I posted just because it was.
Oh god.
Like I'm getting ready to go to the gym. I go downstairs and it's blocked off. They have these red barriers that they use, and the security guards there is like, nope, you got to go back to your room. I'm like, oh, 3 days, go to your room, go to your we're children or something. Go to your room, and and so I'm not gonna say that I made a scene, but other people might say that about because I was not happy with it, and I let them know that I wasn't happy about it, right? And so by the end, there's probably like 10 or 12 security guards there, and I'm speaking my mind, and they're not used to that because everyone else was like, oh, guess I do what I'm told.
is that really dangerous to do there? Or is it not as because from being in the West, we hear all types of like horror stories, and I'm just curious. Like, is it actually like you're gonna get fucking you're gonna go missing one day if you say some shit?
I mean, maybe I don't know. Like I think it depends on how much, and it depends on who you like. I wasn't saying anything that I shouldn't say. I guess you could put it that
Yeah.
way. Like most people know what they should and shouldn't say. And over the past, couple weeks, there have been many videos of people saying things that they shouldn't say, and who knows what has happened to them. Um, yeah. So I'm always pretty careful, um, about exactly what I say. Even if you're angry, I think having self control is important. It's probably the most important time that it's important. Um, so yeah, I think if you're a foreigner, you get a little bit of leeway, but yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. It's a tough situation. They do seem to be opening up now, which is
Yeah, I heard there was some rioting going on over there and shit. Or like
yeah, a bunch of
protest. Maybe
people
not
have
rioting, but protests.
protesting. I mean, a bunch of people have messaged me. There hasn't seemed to be anything here. It's mostly been in other cities. But yeah, it's if you push people for several years of this BS, eventually eventually they sort of wake up and realize actually the World Cup was part of it because the TV broadcast it showed a bunch of people without masks just enjoying watching the World Cup, and then Chinese people were like, they told us that this was like a super dangerous disease, and you know the government is protecting us, but it seems like everywhere else is people are having fun, and we're sitting at home because of there's one case in our neighborhood. Like this is kind of BS,
Yeah.
and I think especially with Omicron, it's not that dangerous. It seems like
No.
90% of cases here are asymptomatic. Um, and so now it's kind of funny. The government wants to open up, but they're having trouble because they brainwash so many people into thinking that it's super dangerous. So people are legitimately afraid to go out and because they might get it. And so the government did such a good job with scaring people that they're having trouble unscaring them. So it's like they want people to open up now and to go out and start the economy because the
Oh
economy is
man.
really hurting. And so they,
Yeah.
now they've completely changed their direction, but they're having trouble getting people to actually go out. Right. So it's pretty astonishing at how effective, the propaganda and the brainwashing is here sometimes.
Yeah, it's varying degrees in different countries. I guess China would be a lot worse than others, obviously. Maybe one topic we can get into right before we wrap this up is um you actually put out a video. I know Faz was talking about like men's mental health and stuff like that last month. What are some things that you do to take care of your mental health? Like, because I think that's actually important to actually maximize muscle gains. Because if you're stressed out and sleep deprived, that's something that can definitely be detrimental. Especially
Yeah,
someone who's like, sorry, especially someone who's doing like a bunch of stuff on YouTube. You're on being on social media as your job, and I feel
yeah,
like social media in general like just fucking zaps my energy
yeah.
and vigor.
I try to, I don't know, I try to keep everything in perspective. Like, there's always going to be hateful comments, mean comments, nasty comments. I mean, some people are just dicks, right? And they would never in a million years say those kind of things to my face, but they have the protection of the internet and anonymity, and so they feel like they can say that kind of stuff, which is fine. I never made it my goal to be liked. I think if someone makes it their goal to be liked by everyone, that is not ever going to happen anyway. Plus,
Mhm.
it's going to lead to a lot of disappointment. So when I make a video or if I put out content, I don't care how many likes I get or if it's disliked or if people leave certain comments. I forget where I saw this, but someone said that the goal is not to be liked, the goal is to be known. And those are two totally different things. Like if your goal is to be known and then someone leaves a nasty comment, well, that's kind of fulfilling your goal because they're there. They're leaving a comment on your page. Like it's not a nice comment, but it's a comment, right? But if your goal is to be liked, yeah, like the internet is not the right place for you for sure. And
Mm.
so I think that's a good way to frame it as a content creator because that's why you're creating content, right? It's to help people, it's to get a message out there. And the more nasty comments I see, the more people who aren't following me are seeing it. So if I get a video that does well, it'll have more of those kind of comments. And if I have a video that doesn't do as well in terms of the algorithm, then I won't see any nasty comments at all because it'll just be followers. So when I see, comments saying like, "Oh, you're a fake natural," or "Your face sucks," or whatever, I don't know. I look at that as a positive thing because it's a sign that I'm doing something right.
Hmm. I mean, the fake natural thing is just a compliment.
It's weird because it is and it isn't. It is because they're saying that your physique is so incredible that in their eyes they don't think you could do it naturally. So that's flattering. On the other hand, they're calling you a lying sack of shit. So it's like they're praising your physique, but they're attacking your character all at the same time. And so it's a weird. It's like, okay, well, thanks, I guess, kind of. Like it's
Yeah,
a
fair
very
enough,
mixed
man.
mixed feeling kind of thing.
Cool, man. Well, let's wrap this thing up. If you just want to let people know where they can find you, that'd be great.
Yeah, so verityfit.com for my books, and then Jeffrey Verity Schofield on YouTube and Instagram. And I started shit posting on Twitter as well, which has been a lot of fun.
You
Uh,
traveled into the dragon's den, eh?
yeah, like that's, talking about nasty comments, that's like the number one platform I've heard. So I'm trying to get some of those, which, it's a work in progress. Haven't gotten many, but I'm still working on the algorithm uh, there. Hopefully, if people see my stuff there, they can leave some nasty comments and help my ego out. So that is GVS Fit there, just six letters, keep it simple. And yeah, it's just my name on Instagram and the YouTubes.
Sounds good, man. And I'll post all the relevant links in the YouTube description so people will know where to go. I appreciate you coming on, man. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.